What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Scott Proctor, and we're back with another college football primer. I'm joined, as always, by Brad Edwards, who's been covering college football for 25 years. Brad, how are we doing today, man?
I'm doing well, man. What a great weekend of games, and
Yeah,
especially the semifinals. I had written an article last week about how disappointing the semis had been the first
yeah,
8 years of the playoff.
yeah.
Year number 9 did not disappoint. Those were two great games.
No doubt about it. It was a treat. It was a treat. The college football playoff semifinals over the weekend. I'm glad that you went there, Brad, because that's where I'm going here to start off the gate. We talk. Was that the best college football semifinal game that we've ever seen? Ohio State and Georgia. As you just mentioned, you had a column recently for BVMSports.com entitled 16 college football playoff semifinals have provided two classics, but not much else. Has that changed? Did we get another classic or two this weekend?
Yeah, we got one more classic.
Yeah,
I mean, the Michigan TCU game was good. I don't think it would be a classic,
sure.
but I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment when it comes to Ohio State and Georgia.
Fair.
The Georgia Oklahoma game from the 2017 season, that Rose Bowl, was pretty epic as well. I think the big difference here, if you want to compare the two, is that the previous one, the Oklahoma Georgia game, was a 2 versus 3, and neither team had previously won the national championship, or at least not. I mean, neither team had won it in the previous decade.
Yeah.
And so you look at that versus, you've got number one defending national champion on the ropes against the number 4 seed. I mean, down double digits multiple times in the game.
Yeah.
And I think all of that, the double digit comeback in the fourth quarter, plus the last second game winning field goal attempt,
Mm-hmm.
you could make a great argument that that was the best semifinal ever played.
No doubt about it. I have to venture and say that it was, man. Especially, again, I'm a quarterback guy. I'm drawing a quarterback play, but just the play of those two quarterbacks in that game in particular was just spectacular. CJ Stroud, obviously, in the losing effort, but I mean, I don't think you could have asked him to play a better game if you're a Buckeye fan. And then obviously, Stetson Bennett, we talked about it last week. You called
Yeah.
him a gamer, and that's exactly what he is. And he showed it again in another big spot against another really good team.
Yeah, he did. And it wasn't the greatest game overall for Bennett, but when it mattered, when it was on the line, like I said, that's been his track record in these big games. When they need a play from him, he makes it. And he made all the plays they needed down the stretch. But like you said, don't take anything away from CJ Stroud, because I think he proved more in that game than he probably had in any other game during his career.
Yeah.
He's had a lot of games with really big numbers against weak defenses that weren't able to cover his receivers. But in this case, not only did he have a great performance, but he did it, as we all know, without his best receiver on the roster.
Right.
Not out there. Jackson Smith-Njigba wasn't out there for most of the season.
Mm-hmm.
But then he loses his tight end, who's a key part of the passing game, early in the game. And then, with more than a quarter to play, he loses Marvin Harrison Jr., who became his best receiver. And I mean, he was missing a lot of key components when he put together some big drives, especially that last one, which a lot of it was with his legs too. I mean, we hadn't seen that throughout his career. We knew he
Correct.
could run.
Right.
We've never seen him be forced to run and show that ability to consistently make plays with his legs. And so he did it all. I wouldn't be surprised if that game doesn't end up making him the number 1 pick in the draft. I'm not saying that he will be, but if he is, I think that game is a big reason why.
No doubt about it. And you mentioned it too. That's something that Buckeye fans in particular have been clamoring for CJ Stroud to do. Use his legs, because as you mentioned, we know he's athletic. We know he has ability to do it, but just seeing him actually put it into action in a game, in a big game at that, was something, for a sight for sore eyes. And again, it's going to definitely bode well. It was the right time to do it. Your last game before you enter the draft. That was
Absolutely
the right case. That was the right time to showcase it all. You mentioned earlier, Brad, just briefly about the last sequence there, the missed game-winning field goal attempt. We talk a lot about legacies, particularly in college football. I'm curious, how much can one play, or really one game, impact a coach, or a program's legacy? Because I'm sure we probably saw an example of it again here this weekend.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When it comes to a game like that, and I don't want to make this about Noah Ruggles, who missed the field goal for Ohio State. You could go back and change any number of plays in that game, but just change one play somewhere along the line, and Ohio State wins it. And that's pretty evident to anybody who watched it.
Right.
And you look at the difference that could make in how coaches are perceived. I mean, first of all, you look at Ryan Day, who came into the game with a lot of Ohio State fans upset with them. Some of them even going as far as calling for him to be replaced. And if they win that game, look, we don't know what would have happened. Let's just say they would have been a heavy favorite against TCU in the national championship game. And if they win the national title, for all the naysayers out there, he would then, with a roster of his own players, have the same number of national championships that Urban Meyer won at Ohio State. And I'm not saying that makes him, the best coach in Buckeyes history. Obviously, people are still going to put Woody Hayes ahead of Urban Meyer on that list. But I mean, it changes the way that Ohio State fans perceive him, and especially after he's gone from there, however long that may be. It's a big deal. One national title compared to none, which is what he currently has because they weren't able to get that win. On the other side, you look at Kirby Smart, and if they beat TCU, which they should, they're going to be people continuing this conversation of, has he caught or even surpassed Nick Saban as the best coach in college football right now? If they lose that game, that conversation isn't taking place. And we're talking about one play. One play is all it would have taken. And Kirby Smart would have finished this season as simply another guy with one national championship. And nobody with one national championship is being compared to Nick Saban, not with a straight face. So look, it's kind of harsh to put it all in one play, but sometimes, as you mentioned, a coach's legacy can be as simple as that.
No doubt about it. And that's why context matters in sports. You can't just look at win-loss record or how many championships somebody has and judge somebody based off, those results. Again, you have to look at the full picture. Context is important, particularly in sports, especially when we're talking about legacy. From one Big Ten coach's legacy to another, we talked a little bit about Mr. Harbaugh last week. And obviously there's more rumors here swirling now that Michigan is eliminated that he'll return to the NFL ranks. If Brad, that this was Harbaugh's last game at Michigan, what will his legacy be as a Wolverine coach?
Yeah, I think his legacy will be that he was a good coach, and he had some teams that had opportunities to do bigger things than they ended up doing. But at the end of the day, he's a Michigan man who came and took over the program at a time when it was really struggling, and in a way that Michigan football really has not struggled outside of that in the last 50 years. And he was able to put it back on its feet and put it in a really good spot. And if he ends up not coaching another game, whoever takes over is going to take over a much better program than the one Harbaugh took over.
Definitely.
And to me, that will be his legacy. It came really close. Once again, I'm not going to say, one play away, right, but he did come really close to doing a lot more than he was able to do. I mean, look, I'd say at the very least, if you want to say one play, that measurement against Ohio State in 2016, an inch or two right there. And at the very least, he's got one more Big Ten title and one more playoff appearance. Yeah. And, from that point, would the resume be any different? I don't know. But he's done a very good job at Michigan.
No doubt about it. You hit it right on the head. Again, if you're looking at him and say that, he didn't win a national championship and you look at that as a failure, I just don't see it that way. Because as you mentioned, he took over a program in a Michigan program that historically is one of the best, that was at a really rough time. And now they're obviously back in the playoff, back-to-back seasons. So
here's a question for you, Scott. How many national championships did Bo Schembechler win?
I mean, the way people talk about him, you would think he won a few, right? You would think he won
5 or 6, right? The answer is 0. Bo Schembechler did not win a national title. Same number Jim Harbaugh. I mean, Michigan has won national title since 1950, and that was won by Lloyd Carr.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, and even that was a look. Am I going to sit here and say Nebraska was as good as Michigan that season? Did they deserve to get a split? I don't know. It was a little shady the way it worked out at the end. But the reality is they won the AP national championship, didn't even win the coaches that year. And that's all Michigan has since 1950. So the bar for Jim Harbaugh should not be as high as a lot of people want to make it.
Spot on. I don't even have anything to add on. That's absolutely right, Brad. No doubt about it. Let's move on to the national championship. It sounds like I'm getting a vibe from you that you're pretty confident who's going to win this one, but I'll ask it anyway. Brad, what chance do you give TCU to pull off another upset and win a national championship over the Georgia Bulldogs? And if you don't give them any a chance, why is that?
Yeah, I'm not going to say zero because I'm a math guy and I know what zero means.
Right.
And as long as there's a chance that Georgia can still get food poisoning and be without half its starting lineup,
Yeah.
Or that starters could be injured during the game, it's not zero. I think I saw that ESPN's FPI had it at about 75% for Georgia. I would put it higher than that. I would say 85, 90%. To me, this is the biggest mismatch in a national championship game since Alabama Notre Dame 10 years ago. And I was at that game. I was able to watch those teams in the tunnel as they passed by each other before kickoff. And I'm telling you, Scott, the difference was obvious just from looking at them. Like, just Alabama's players we already knew they were more athletic, right, but they were also bigger. TCU has great athletes, and I'm not going to say they don't have the athletes to compete with Georgia, but I think at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, it is a huge advantage to the Georgia Bulldogs, and I think ultimately that's where they're going to win this game. The only chance they have, I think, is for Georgia to have some sort of meltdown. I mean, look, what did it take for TCU to beat Michigan? It took 2 pick sixes and Michigan fumbling the ball at the half-yard line going in for a touchdown. We can debate whether that play should have even taken place after the replay review of what had originally been called a touchdown. But regardless, it took a lot of things going TCU's way. Now, they earned it. They made a lot of plays in that game to win it.
Yeah.
But if you ask me, Michigan TCU play 10 times based on what I saw, I say Michigan wins 7 or 8 out of 10. I think they're the better team. And I think Georgia is a lot better than Michigan. So, look, I think this is not only going to be a Georgia win, but I think it's going to be a decisive Georgia win.
Yeah, you would think. I have to agree with you. I think the only way I can envision a TCU win is, kind of similar to how we talked to a couple weeks ago. If Stetson Bennett goes out there and has a game unlike that we've seen him play, where he throws, 2 or 3 interceptions. But based on what we see out of Stetson Bennett in big games, that's not likely to happen. I expect the Bulldogs to roll and go for the first repeat in some time. Obviously, I want to.
I said 10 years. That was actually the last time there was back-to-back. That was the second in a row for Alabama when they beat Notre Dame. So that's the last time it happened.
That would be crazy. That would be crazy. I want to ask this too. Since we're talking about Georgia a little bit, if they were to win their second national championship in as many years, do they become the new standard, the new dynasty in college football to you?
Yeah, so this is what I just touched on with the one play, right? I mean, without that one play, Ohio State's getting ready to play TCU, and we're not having this conversation. But it's a fair question to ask. And I'll say this. While 2 national titles, even 2 in a row, does not put any program in the category that Alabama is currently in as far as the dynasty aspect of it. It is a good start for a dynasty in the making. And with Kirby Smart not even being 50 years old yet, and being in a state that just has loads of talent, his ability to recruit nationally, there's no reason to believe he won't win more. So, yeah, everything is in place for it to be a dynasty for Georgia, but it's a long way from being Alabama. I will throw this in there, though. If they win this game, he will have accomplished something that Nick Saban has not at Alabama. And that's not winning back-to-back titles. As we said, Alabama did that in 11 and 12. But what he would have done would have been to go 2 years losing only 1 game over that span. Nick Saban has not had a 2-year span with only 1 loss at Alabama. So both of them being in the SEC, I think it's a fair comparison to make. And that would tell you that at least for this 2-year run, I think these 2 Georgia teams have been better than any back-to-back teams that Nick Saban's had at Bama.
Yeah, it's the consistency, right? And again, doing it in the SEC against the best competition, there's not really a hole you can poke in the Georgia dynasty deal and whatnot. So go ahead.
The other thing, Scott, I would say about this, we're talking dynasty. Okay, I mean, for me, I always, if it comes down to a coach, and I want to say the coach is proven at the college level, I want to see him do it with more than 1 quarterback. Like when Dabo made back-to-back national championship games with Deshaun Watson. And people were saying, what a great coach. I was like, let's see him do it with another quarterback. And he did with Trevor Lawrence.
Yep.
Okay, so I think I'm not doubting that he can do it. In fact, there's a good chance he's got a quarterback on the roster right now who's more talented than Stetson Bennett. But I want to see Kirby Smart win a national title with another quarterback before I'm ready to put him into this dynasty conversation.
No doubt about it. Last question, Brad, I got for you before we get up out of here. Which of these 4 teams currently, or I should say, which of these 4 teams that made the college football playoff this season is most likely to be back in the CFP? And maybe it's an easy answer of Georgia, but I'm curious your thoughts.
I mean, it's never an easy answer to say that an SEC team is going to be in the playoff the next year, because we have 1 year left of only 4 teams. And if you're not the SEC champ, there's a chance you don't get in. So it may be easier to say Ohio State, just because I think they're more likely to, win the Big Ten after not doing it for the previous 2 years. But they're losing some really good players, including their quarterback. I probably ultimately would go with Georgia. Because there's a chance you could get 2 SEC teams in. Yeah. And like I said, even though Stetson Bennett has been a gamer, Georgia could have a better quarterback next year,
which is scary.
And when you look at everyone else that's coming back, like, even if he's not better, just the returning pieces, they were very inexperienced on defense this year after all they lost from the previous year. Right. Most of those guys are back on D. They got plenty of skill back on offense. Georgia's just got everything there. I mean, Stetson Bennett is the only thing that you would point to say he's going to be tough to replace. Yeah. And I think from an intangible standpoint, he'll be very tough to replace. From a talent standpoint, I don't know that he necessarily will be.
No doubt. Yeah. A lot of that stuff makes sense. I would probably side with Ohio State, simply for the fact that, again, they're in the Big Ten. We talked about this recently too. It's part of the reason why you think Luke Fickell and my guy Matt Rule in Nebraska, you do pretty well in the Big Ten, because there's not a lot of competition. And I would assume that Harbaugh will no longer be in Michigan next season. That makes the path for Ohio State getting out of the Big Ten into the CFP easier. And it's just the way Ryan Day and that staff recruit. I mean, Ohio State has turned into wide receiver university. Not that that's the most important position on the field, but again, they're doing it with quarterbacks as well. They just had the 2024 number 1 who recently decommitted from Ohio State, but I have a hunch that he's going to end up, going back to the Buckeyes and Dylan Raiola. So they're going to have guys at the quarterback position and obviously at the skill positions as well. I would expect Ohio State to be back in the CFP next season with some nice momentum.
Look, I'm with you, Scott. I think when you look at, I answered Georgia, but I understand your logic, which is that when you have more talent than anybody else in the conference, as Ohio State does, the odds of you going 3 years in a row without winning it, the odds are on your side.
No doubt about it. But that's all we got for this episode of the College Football Primer. For your boy Scott Proctor, for Brad Edwards, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Feel free to check out our other videos, and don't forget to smack that subscribe button down below while you're at it. Also, for more great and original content, head right over to bvmsports.com.